And start by opening the hood and opening up the radiator cap. Make sure that the vehicle has not been running and this is cold. If you open this hot, antifreeze can spurt out at you and that'll be a bad day. Open this up and set this aside. Using a 5/8 wrench, we're up underneath the radiator. We're gonna go ahead and turn the drain plug here counterclockwise. Make sure you have a catch can ready to go. Now once we're at just a drip here, we're gonna go ahead and tighten up the drain plug and you'll feel it just kind of pop into place. All right, let's go ahead and lower the vehicle. Disconnecting our battery here using a 10mm. We're gonna disconnect our negative as well. We're gonna go ahead and remove or unclick the 3 retainer tabs here. Right there, and there's one in the back. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this bolt right here. That is a 13mm, and there would normally be one here, but ours is missing one. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove that bolt. Pop this hose off. Using an 8mm socket, we're gonna go ahead and loosen this hose clamp here and this one right here. This tube that we just connected from the air box comes over here to the side of the oil fill neck. I'm just gonna slide that off and set this aside. Now I'm gonna go ahead and pull this unit up. It might be easier if we pop this and then separate this, set this aside. Grab the air filter lid here. If you can, pull the whole unit right up and out. We're gonna go ahead and remove the upper radiator hose. We wanna go ahead and loosen these clamps, slide them onto the hose, and then pull the hose off. With this hose clamp loose, we're gonna go ahead and remove this from the water neck here. Then we're gonna go down to the lower clamp with your pliers. I'm just gonna pinch that, and we're just gonna try and rotate this hose back out of the way. I'm gonna pinch that clamp there. We're gonna use a pry bar here just to try and get behind that hose. We want to go ahead and loosen this hose here. If we could just rotate that hose up and out of the way like so, that'll be fine just like that. So what we want to do next is remove the fan shroud. And in order to do that, we have to go down here and we have to loosen this nut for the fan and the fan clutch unit off of the water pump. Doing so, we're going to use this wrench looking tool here. I'm going to position this on there like so. Then we're going to use our impact gun. Now that we have the clutch fan nut loose, I'm going to go ahead and remove our tools. We're now going to go ahead and remove this 13mm bolt here using our extension, our socket and ratchet. Now the reason we had to remove the nut on the fan and the fan clutch unit off of the water pump like that is that we can't pull the fan shroud without pulling that fan at the same time. Go ahead and remove this bolt and set it aside. Now what we're going to do is remove the fan. I'm just simply spinning the fan. That nut is threading off of the water pump. If this doesn't work for you, you're just going to have to get a wrench in there. Now with the fan loose, you can grab the fan blade. We're going to grab the shroud, pull it out of the end cap over here, over and up. And try and work this all out together. Go ahead and get that fan out of the way. We'll set that aside, and then we'll go ahead and manipulate this out the rest of the way. There we go. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and remove this belt. We're going to use our 3/8 drive ratchet. I'm going to lift up on the tensioner and work that belt off. You want to take note of how the belt is run, all the pulleys and accessories that it's on. Make it easier for reinstallation later on. Now on the top of the water pump, you have this bracket right here. There's a bolt, 3 nuts. That's 13 millimeter. We're going to use our air ratchet and 13 millimeter socket and remove those. Grab that bracket. Now there's a lower hose right here. Comes to our water pump bypass tube, and there's a hose clamp on it. So we're going to use our pliers. I'm going to go ahead and loosen that clamp and work it back. With that clamp loose, I'm going to gently grab that hose and just work it so we can break it free. And it is now loose. I'm going to try and work that hose back and off of the bypass tube. You want to have a catch can underneath in case there's any residual antifreeze underneath. And there we go. Now what I want to do is remove the belt tensioner. We're going to use a 15 millimeter socket on this. Using a 13 millimeter socket, go ahead and remove this bolt on the idler pulley. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this 13 millimeter bolt from the bypass tube, attaching it to the water pump. Now we want to use our tool for these hose clamps here. We need to remove this hose clamp and pull this hose off, as well as the lower radiator hose off of the water pump itself. It's tough to get pliers in here for this job. It's great to have this tool. I'm going to fit this inside. Let's go ahead and work that hose back. Lower hose. Just going to use some pliers, break that hose free. I'm going to do the same for the bottom. So there's a series of water pump bolts that we need to remove. They're all 13 millimeter. There's one down here. There's one right in here. Here. There's one up top. Then there is one right in here. This stud bolt right here is actually a 15 millimeter. There's 4 more bolts, one right underneath the water neck. We have one on the right side and then 2 on the lower belly of the water pump. Now we have one of these lower bolts here. As you start to pull it out, it hits the power steering pump pulley. You can't really get that out fully, so we're simply going to leave it in for now, and we're going to get the last bolt on the bottom. With that separated, I'll go ahead and work the water pump out. While we're doing this, that one bolt that was hitting that power steering pump, we can now get that loose and we'll separate that. Now that we have the water pump removed, we want to go ahead and make sure that the surface where the water pump attaches to is clean and dry as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and use a spray cleaner and some towels. I'm going to go on in and start wiping down the face of the block. I'm going to do this all the way around all of the perimeters. Let's go ahead and swap over the thermostat and thermostat housing here using a 13mm socket. Let's loosen those bolts and get those out. So our thermostat was working totally fine. We're just going to go ahead and swap that over. If you wanted to, now would be a prime time to go ahead and swap that out. So what we want to do before installation is we want to go ahead and get our new gasket installed. And it's pretty much molded to the form that it needs to be in. So we just line this up, feed this around, and press it into place. Work your way all the way around, finishing each section at a time. Let's now go ahead and take our new water pump. I'm going to carefully lower this down. Be careful not to disturb that gasket that is on the back side. One last inspection of that gasket. Now that one bolt that we had that was causing an issue below that was hitting the power steering pump pulley, I'm going to go ahead and feed that through the water pump first. Then we're going to try and work the water pump into place. All right, with that one bolt lined up in the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and position the rest of the water pump in place. And then we have the large bolt here with that stud on it. So up here I actually made a cardboard template by laying the old water pump on the cardboard, putting the bolts in place where they were, tap the head, and then push the bolts through. That way there, I don't have to worry about what short bolt went where and what long bolt went where. We have the lower bolt in that was tough to install by the power steering pump. We have the bolt up top, or the stud unit. And what we're going to do is I'm going to start with this bolt here, work up the right side, over here, work up the left side. Now I'm going to go ahead and torque all of these bolts to 18 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and install our upper bracket. Go ahead and torque these down to 21 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the lower bypass tube bolt. I'll go ahead and torque that bolt down to 18 foot-pounds. Let's now install the hoses. I'm going to grab your idler pulley with your bolt. Let's go ahead and get that started. Spin that bolt in as far as you can. Make sure that pulley spins free. Next, grab your tensioner, line this up, put that pin inside the hole right here, and get that bolt started there. I'm going to go ahead and torque the idler pulley bolt to 40 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and torque down the belt tensioner bolt to 30 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and lower the shroud down a little bit. Let's go ahead and lower the fan shroud down. Work that down a little bit. And remember, can't get too far before we feed our fan down into place, because we have to do these together. I'm going to lower the fan shroud down. I'm going to get this peg into place right here. All right, so what we do is we put the shroud down and into the little tabs down underneath the bottom of the radiator. We're gonna line up this plastic pin right here and then line this up, and we're gonna get our bolt started. Now the fan is still sitting in the bottom of the fan shroud itself. You wanna be careful how you place that, because you don't wanna damage the radiator or the fins themselves. We're just going to get this bolt started. We'll come back and tighten that down in a minute. And what you want to do is reach down behind the shroud, grab the fan, and you're going to have to hang over the front with two hands and try and get that fan started. Once you get this threaded on the water pump, go ahead and grab a wrench. You can spin it on. You might actually be able to spin the fan, and you can see the unit itself spinning on pretty good. Once it bottoms out, just grab your wrench, tighten that down. You want to come back to the single bolt for your radiator fan shroud. We're going to snug that down. This is just holding it in place, and it's plastic, so you don't want to tighten it too much. For ease of installation, we're going to go ahead and remove this hose off the thermostat neck here completely. You can use your pliers or your tool, whatever's going to work best for you. I'm just going to work this in and then just take that hose off. Next, go ahead and take your thermostat, make sure it has the rubber insulator or gasket on there. Line that up, push it into the water pump. Here, make sure that the surface is clean, it's not rusty or have any debris on it. Go ahead and line that up, and we're just going to go ahead and get the bolt started. I'm going to go ahead and torque these bolts to 200 inch-pounds and repeat for the lower. Now we're going to go ahead and install the lower hose. Then we're going to go ahead and line up the upper hose. I'm going to work these on together. I'm going to go ahead and work that lower hose on. And then we'll get the upper one popped on. I'm going to position this clamp. And we're going to use a pair of pliers to go ahead and grab this clamp on the lower portion to work that in and get that into a better spot. Now, when filling your radiator, you always want to make sure that you're using the correct antifreeze for your model application. And also want to make sure that you mix it at 50-50. You don't have to always run straight antifreeze. Go ahead and wipe this up. I'm going to install our radiator cap. Once that's installed, we're now going to go ahead and install our air intake system. Once that's done, we'll start the vehicle, and then we'll test and check for the correct level of our coolant. We want to go ahead and install our air filter box base. We have this post right here that needs to go into this rubber bushing right here. Let's go ahead and get that installed. Once you have that installed, let's go ahead and get the bolt installed. All right, we're going to go ahead and install the bolt for the box here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install our air filter, then we're going to put our lid on. and snap our clips on. Let's go ahead and install our intake tube. I'm going to put this post into the rubber grommet. And then while we're doing that, we're going to line up the intake tube here, work that on there, compress it, and we're going to work it onto the air box itself. Let's go ahead and tighten down our hose clamps. I'm going to go ahead and hook up our tube right here, press that down, and I'll reconnect the other end right here. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and reconnect our battery now. I'll go ahead and snug this down. Once that's snug, we'll go ahead and press this cap back into place and put our negative on.